नमस्कार साथियों। तो यूजीसी नेट पेपर फर्स्ट टीचिंग एप्टीट्यूड की क्लास में आप सभी का स्वागत है। सो दिस इज द इंग्लिश मीडियम क्लास फॉर द टीचिंग एप्टीट्यूड। सो ऑल द स्टूडेंट्स who are here are welcome to the class of constructivism. शशांक जी, शुभ दोपहरी। चलिए, तो जितने भी हमारे ऑफलाइन बैच के साथी हैं वो सभी के सभी इस चीज़ को इंश्योर कर लें कि उनको एक्सेस मिल चुका हो, जिनको एक्सेस का बोला गया है। ठीक है, क्योंकि जल्दी ही मैं इसको कंप्लीट करूँगा, इस टॉपिक को, और इस चैप्टर को कंप्लीट करते ही फिर मैं क्वेश्चंस लूँगा आपके, और फिर क्वेश्चंस लेने के बाद हम मूव ऑन कर जाएंगे। किसके ऊपर मूव ऑन कर जाएंगे? हम ऐप के ऊपर। तो फटाफट चलिए आज के कंटेंट को देखते हैं हम। लास्ट क्लास में हमने बात कर ली थी टीचिंग का हमारा मीनिंग क्या था। अब हम फेजेस ऑफ टीचिंग के ऊपर हमने बात करनी थी, तो आज हम फेजेस ऑफ टीचिंग को देखेंगे। चलिए, हम फेजेस ऑफ टीचिंग के ऊपर बात कर रहे हैं। निर्माणवाद के लिए ट्यूशन नहीं पढ़ना होता महोदय। शशांक जी, निर्माणवाद के लिए ट्यूशन नहीं पढ़ना होता। निर्माणवाद का मतलब ये है कि आपको खुद अपने ज्ञान का निर्माण करना है। चलिए देखें इसको। फेजेस ऑफ टीचिंग वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट। So what are phases of teaching? So whenever we are talking about the teaching, we know that teaching involves various kind of processes. We have seen the Bloom taxonomy, we have seen the various kind of problems faced by the teacher, we have seen that education, what are the aspects of education, what are the objectives of education for a teacher. So according to teacher, we have to perform the task. For that we have to have a systematic planning. We need the systematic planning. So we can consider that teaching is a collection of various steps, and when we actually talk about these steps constitute the processes, and we call them the phases of teaching. We call them as phases of teaching. So if we want to identify the phases of teaching, there are three phases of teaching. That is pre-teaching phase or pre-learning phase, then interactive teaching phase, and third one is what will you do as a teacher after the teaching or the learning process. So we will see that there are three bases of teaching. So let us see one by one what are the various aspects of. So first one is the pre-active phase of learning. Whenever we are talking about the pre-active phase of teaching needs the planning of teaching. So it includes all those activities which a teacher performs before classroom or before entering the classroom. So the focus is on before behavior of the teacher, before the teaching phase. So it essentially includes the planning of a lesson. So whenever we are talking about the planning of the lesson, it is not only concerned with our lesson plan, but in broad sense, we are actually planning the system of the child. If we are planning the system of the child, we call this as the system approach, because we have to plan whole. And in approaches of teaching, we will see all the approaches. After learning, we will do the approaches, that what is the hardware approach, what is software approach, what is system approach, what is a constructivist approach, behaviorist approach, the approach for child-centric approach, teacher-centric approach, process-centric approach, plan-centric approach. There are various kind of approaches we are focusing on. So whenever we are planning, not only for the lesson, but for the system, whole system of learning of the child, then it is system approach. So what planning includes? Designing of the lesson plan? Yes. Identifying the objectives? Yes. In terms of student learning, the strategies adopted by the teacher as well as the learner? Yes. Methods to be adopted by the teacher and by the learner? Yes. Use of teaching aids by the teacher or the teaching learning material to be used within the class. So what we see? We see that essentially we have to plan the objectives, the strategy, the methods, the teaching aids, various teaching learning materials, the techniques, the approaches, the skills we have to use, the strategy we want to use within the class. So everything we have to plan will be planned within the pre-active phase of teaching. So nowadays in the CBCS module, what we are implying? We are now implying the CBCS, choice-based credit system, is being implemented in the higher education in India. So as CBCS is implemented within the India, what we see, the planning phase of instructional act, the pre-active phase becomes the planning phase for instructional act. We can say that it is the planning phase for the, because for CBCS we have to have the programmed instructions. As we should have the programmed instructions, every instruction to be provided within the classroom to facilitate the learning should be planned in the pre-active phase for the teacher, for the facilitation of the learning within the class, for the learning of the child or the learner. So the foundation of this phase is set through the establishment of some kind of goals or objectives and how we gonna achieve them, ways and means. So programmed instruction is actually focused on having the ways and means to achieve the goals or objectives we are planning to achieve through the teaching learning process. Now planning is done for taking decision about the following aspects. So planning in the pre-active phase about the following aspects: selection of the content, particularly in the higher education class, the students who are, if they are for the school education, this is not the exact thing we are planning to have. Still the explanation will be different, the pointers will be same. जितने भी हमारे साथी उच्च शिक्षा के लिए जुड़े यानी नेट के हिसाब से जुड़े तो उनके लिए तो ये चीजें मैं स्पष्ट कर रहा हूँ, मैं व्याख्या कर रहा हूं उसके हिसाब से। जितने साथी किसी और के एग्जाम के हमारे यूट्यूब प्लेटफॉर्म पे पढ़ रहे हैं इसको, तो यहां पर बिंदुवार तो समान चीजें रहेंगी, लेकिन इनकी व्याख्यान अलग रहेंगी, क्योंकि व्याख्यान हमें स्कूली बच्चों के हिसाब से करने हैं। अभी मैं व्याख्यान जो ले रहा हूं वो ले रहा हूं किसका, वो मैं ले रहा हूं आपका पोस्ट स्कूलिंग, यानी कॉलेज लेवल के, यूनिवर्सिटी लेवल के हमारे जितने चीजें हैं उसके ऊपर हम बात कर रहे हैं। सो सिलेक्शन ऑफ द कंटेंट टू बी टॉट। First, we have to select the content we have to teach as a lecture. Then organization of the content. It is very important, because if we are not organizing, we cannot have the subsumption, we cannot have the hierarchy of the concepts, because concepts are always interrelated. And when we have seen that initially we have to take some concept, then we have to grow upon it, then we have to grow upon it. That is the process is called subsumption or the chunking, or various kind of processes are there. But for every process we have to organize the content in a hierarchical manner or in a sequential manner. From previous knowledge to current knowledge, from whole to part, from part to whole, whatever is your planning, it is up to you, but it has to be planned which direction you are taking for the content. So you have to break down the content, organize it in a sequential manner, be it in hierarchy, be it in the downwards movement, be it from whole to part, be it from part to whole, or any other direction you are thinking upon. Then the maxims and principles you are using. We'll see the principles and maxims also. So principles and maxims, whatever we are using, there also will be the part of the planning effectively. Then the appropriate method we have to select, and the tools, various tools, evaluation tools and the instruction tools, then assessment tools, then the communication tools. We have to also take the decision about them, and we have to use how we're gonna use them. So we have to prepare for tools also. Then activities which we are pursuing in the pre-active phase, having the clear cut, definite clarity about the goals and objectives, then we cannot be sure about the path we're gonna take. Then our plan will be a futile one, because if we have to plan, then for sound planning we should have clear goals and objectives. In the Bloom taxonomy, we have seen that we were expecting from the child types of objectives. First one is the entering behavior, and second one is the kind of objectives, the entering behavior and the terminal behavior. So if we want to see that objectives are determined according to the psychology of the pupil, that is child psychology, and needs of the school, as objectives will be defined. So we are focused. बहुत धीरे है लेकिन बीच में बहुत ज्यादा बफरिंग होने लगी थी, अब ओके है सबका? एक बार ये थम्स अप कीजिएगा, इतने साथी हैं, एक बार ये थम्स अप कीजिएगा। इफ्तिकार जी, हाँ जल्दी ही नेट एजुकेशन का पेपर सेकंड के लिए आप बात कर रहे होंगे, उसको शुरुआत करेंगे। So people who are watching us, just okay, Amandeep, thank you. So we are talking about the second aspect for the selection of the content. That is the second aspect for the pre-active phase. Then third one is the sequencing the element for content of presentation. Iftikhar, very soon we will launch the program, because I myself will take up the education paper second. It is not JRF, education paper second. So actually we are working on various kind of questions. After that we will launch the course. After making selections, the third one is sequencing the elements of the content for presentation. Now we have seen that now we have to sequence them, the various kind of elements of content, so that we can present them within the classroom. So after the content we have selected, we have to take up the logical manner, we have to take up the sequential psychological manner, we have to arrange the content so that they assist in the transfer of learning. That is, on the previous learning, the next learning will be dependent upon, will be based upon. That is, that I have called it as hierarchy of content you have to make, so that the chunking or the subsumption will be easy. We call this as the chunking. When we are sequencing them, we are actually chunking them together, or we are assisting in the subsumption. So we have to focus on that also. Then comes the selection after the instructional methodology. Fourth one is, because in the CBSE system we have to focus on the providing instructions to the child. We don't have to focus on the teaching, we have to focus on the instructions, because on the basis of the choices the child has made, we have to provide the instructions to him so that they can become the autonomous learner. Nowadays, through the CBSE system, we are providing the autonomy of learning to the child, and for facilitating the autonomy, we should have the proper planning of the instructions. So instructional methodology, the kind of strategies we are using, the sequencing of the content, how the child will enter the behavior, and what are the level of students we are expecting from. That will be from the terminal behavior. What are we expecting as a terminal behavior? Everything will be planned, will be selected in the instructional methodology. Then how and when of teaching strategies. That means we are going for the effectiveness. Shashank Ranjan ji, if we are talking about the autonomy, Shashank ji has asked for the autonomy. So like I have given the instructions that you can ask me anything related to the content. If it is not related to the content, like if I am talking about today I am talking about the phases of teaching, and you are going to ask me what is the tension between India and China, that it becomes an irrelevant question. So I have given you autonomy to ask the question. That is the autonomy, and you can ask me anything, but I have to provide the instructional methodology that your questions should be in line with the teaching learning process, the format, the method we are following. So autonomy means that whatever you want to do, you can do. So how we have given autonomy to the child? By providing him the choices to take up the courses. That is in the CBCS. Now the courses he is choosing will gain him the credits, and various kind of the certificates or the diploma or the degree they have been constructed so that when they are completing their credits, they will be awarded the degrees. That is the autonomy. So autonomy is not about the independence. Independent learning strategy is not about this. Whenever we are instructing them, that means we are providing them autonomy to learn. It is not about the strategy, it is about the style of learning. It is about the choice of content, the choice of course you are selecting. So autonomy is a planned thing according to our instructions. If we are not properly planning the instructions, then autonomy will not be provided to the learner. Then comes the teaching strategy, which we are talking about. Then comes the how and when teaching strategy. That means if we are taking up various kind of methods and strategies, then which method and which strategy is suitable for which part of the content during which session of the class, we have to plan it accordingly. Because if the chosen one is not suitable for the particular content or particular group of child or particular time of the class, then what will happen? Then our efforts will be useless and the teaching or the learning will not be effective. So how and when is actually the smartness of selecting your teaching strategy. We have seen the 3 indicators for that. The individual differences of the child, that is according to the child. The content which we are teaching according to the content, and the third one is the socio-cultural context, that is the socialization and enculturation of the child. If our teaching strategy is best suited for all these 3 context of the child, context of the content, and context of the society, then it will be the best teaching strategy in that particular situation, and we call it that the learning and teaching will be more effective. It will be more effective. Then comes the second phase. Anything you want to ask from the first phase? Anybody? So now we focus on the interactive phase, that is the during learning phase. So when we are talking about the during learning phase, what it includes? It includes execution of the plan which we have made in the pre-active phase. So we will select the modes. We have planned the modes. Now according to these suitable modes, we provide the learning experiences to the child. Specifically, we provide the learning experiences according to the which we have seen in the planning phase. The planning will based upon the 3 things. First one is the individual differences. Second one is the content. That is the objectives we want to have within the changes within the behavior of the child. And third one is the socio-cultural context. Now we will take up the suitable mode and execute the plan, because we have planned it in the pre-active phase. Now we will execute it in the interactive phase. So we have seen that autonomy is provided to the child. So we are focusing on the instruction. So instruction becomes a very complex process. Why it is so complex? Because first of all, we have to maintain these three contexts: context of the child, context of the society, context of the content or the curriculum. Then we have to also provide the autonomy to the child. But with the autonomy, we have to also have the restriction of changes in behavior, because for every content we have clear-cut clarity of objectives, what we want to achieve through that content. So what we see? We see that the complexity arises. Like Shashank sir has asked for, what is autonomy? Why he is confused about autonomy? At one point we are talking about, at one side we are talking about we have to teach. Then we also are talking about the autonomy of the learner. Are they not conflicting? If we are dictating the terms, then how can be autonomy of the learner? Because it will be teacher centric. Me being a teacher within the class, leading the class, will control the class. So how it's so that it becomes an interactive phase or the autonomy to the child? Here comes the interactive phase. The learner are provided with a deliberately designed environment to interact with. So learning by doing, that includes interaction. So we will facilitate, deliberately facilitate the environment. So we have to design it accordingly. We have to design it accordingly because we want to facilitate the changes in behavior that are our objectives. So what we see? We see that pre-specified objective of bringing about specific desirable changes. In the pre-active phase, we have specific desirable changes which we have planned as specific objectives, which Bloom has termed as EBOs, expected behavioral objectives. Now we have to design the environment, classroom environment, so that every learner through the interaction, through the activity, actually gain or learn these changes. So the instructions, we can plan it in the classroom, in the laboratory, outdoor, in the library. Everywhere we will specifically design the environment. Now we are facilitating the environment. That means we are controlling the environment. But within that environment, autonomy is provided to the learner. When this environment is felt autonomous for the learner, it is one of the important questions, because that here's the complexity lies. You have deliberately planned an environment. Now how it can be so that it will be autonomous for the learner? If we have considered each need or the individual difference of the child within our planning, then we have actually given the autonomy to the learner, still deliberately designing the environment, because the autonomy of the environment, autonomy of the child is the basis of our deliberately designing the environment. So by teacher, student interact with certain specific environmental stimuli like natural components, outdoor, information from books, certain equipments like in laboratory, or various kind of simulations we are providing. So in this phase, what we see that learning is directed in predetermined directions to achieve pre-specific goals which we have identified as a teacher in the pre-active phase. So in the predetermined environment, no learning other than what a teacher has decided upon as instructional objectives does not take place. So what we see, all learning will be placed according to the decision of the teacher. So what we see that variety of experiences that the students are getting will provide the learning opportunities, because we are working upon the various kind of experiences which he will get through learning by doing, through activities. We are not dictating the terms here, we are not dictating the content here, we are not delivering the content here. We are facilitating the environment, deliberately planned environment, so that it would lead to the development within the child, development towards the changes in behavior which we are expecting. So all those activities which are performed by a teacher after entering the class are clubbed under interactive phase of teaching. So whatever teacher is doing after entering class comes under interactive phase of teaching. Generally, these activities are concerned with presentation, delivery of the content in the class. So we see that there are two major things in it. First one is presentation, second is delivery of the content. So teacher provides verbal stimulation of various kinds, makes explanations, asks questions, listens to the students' response, provide guidance. These are the major things the teacher has to go through. So the teacher provides verbal stimulation of various kinds, makes explanation. This is repeated, the line is repeated. So now we will take up the various activities which are being suggested here. First one is sizing up of the class. So what is the sizing up of the class? That means we have to understand each and every pupil. If we can't understand each and every pupil, that will the pupil will provide some kind of hindrances to the teaching learning process. So if somebody says that I have very tyrant students, I have very tyrant pupil, that means that he is not understanding his pupil, he is not understanding his student. Therefore, they are trying the teacher. So if students are creating nuisance in the classroom, that means still you haven't understood them. Still you lack the understanding of their needs as a learner, as a student within your class. So as your learning is not meaningful for them, therefore what they are doing, they are not getting much from you. And as they are not getting much from you, what will happen? Ultimately, they will stop pursuing your style of teaching. And when they stop pursuing your style of teaching, what they will do, either they become silent within the class or they become nuisance within the class. There will be two scenarios. If they are not liking your teaching, if they are not getting anything from your teaching, if they are not having seen your teaching as meaningful, they will create either nuisance or they will become silent. They don't bother about the teaching. Just I have to sit, I have to get the attendance so that I can give the exam. Because nowadays attendance is necessary. Why we have to make the university has to make the attendance necessary? Because the people are not interested in taking classes. They are not interested in taking classes. Therefore, the university has to make the rule that if the certain amount of attendance is not there, you are not going to enter the examination. So this is sizing of the class is necessary for this. Then knowing the learners. After understanding the class, now we have to understand the abilities, the interest, the attitude, the academic background of the learner, so that we can plan accordingly. Our instruction plan for the content will be very efficient. If we have to understand, we can have the placement, like in the new classes we generally do the placement assessment. Otherwise what we'll do, we will do the diagnostic assessment to understand the child. If we have taken some previous classes, still we are not identifying the child, then we have to actually make efforts to know the pupil. So the teacher starts teaching activities after diagnosing by questioning regarding action and reaction. So there are two types of activities are involved here: initiation and response. These two activities we will see. So they are the basis of the verbal interaction, and they will occur between teacher and student. So we'll have the type of conversation, then we will have the cone of experiences. We also understand what is the cone of experiences. Then we will also see the instructional planning. Then we will see the various kind of questioning, how we can question technique. So these kind of things which we have to take up, because if the interacting phase has to be there should be some activities. So teacher performs some activities, the student reacts, or when student performs some activities, the teacher reacts. We'll see the vice versa. If I am doing something, like I can lead the learning and doing, what can happen? We have taken up one activity and the students expect the teacher should also do it. So I start by doing it, and after I have done this, then what will happen? Then we will see that the student will do it. So whenever teacher is doing some activity, the students should react, that is, they should ask questions, and when they are performing, then teacher should react. That means they have to assess the child, they have to diagnose him, they have to provide feedback, they have to provide remedial procedures. So they are going to suggest according to the assessment wherever there is a learning gap, there is difficulties, there are problems. So if a student is facing any kind of problem, any kind of learning activity, any kind of difficulties in the learning, then the teacher will react, provide feedback, try to diagnose him, try to provide the remedial processes. There will be there. So the teacher performs the following activities in order to analyze the nature of non-verbal and verbal interaction. So what we see: selection and presentation of stimuli. What kind of stimuli is being selected and presented to the learner? Feedback and reinforcement, which we have seen, and deployment of strategies for the various kind of diagnosis, feedback, remedy, selection, presentation. We have to understand those also. So selection and presentation of stimuli, the motive, how it becomes effective. So what kind of stimulus is needed to motivate the child? The teacher should select the specific stimulus so that child can be motivated for the desired activities. We often say this kind of phenomena as token economy. We have to understand the response cost of the child. Then we have to provide the specific appropriate stimulus so that we can get the response out of the child. Because if they are not acting, reacting, interacting, then there will be no learning in this format, in the CBCS format. Earlier what happening, the lecturer means that you have to lecture upon the child. Then you are lecturing upon the student is gathering or not gathering, it is not any of your concern. You have to take the test, and if they are failed in test, we will say that they have not learned in my class. But nowadays we call it token economy, because we as a teacher is facilitating the activities, and if we are facilitating the activities, then we have to have the we want to know the exact stimuli for that learner so that they can participate in the activities. And if we know that particular token which will attract the learner towards the activity, so that we can provide the token to the learner and start his engagement in the activity, so that start of the learning, then it is called the token economy. So we have to take up the token and present it to the learner, so that if they are presentation of the stimuli, the learner will be motivated to learn. Then the feedback and reinforcement, we have seen that the various kind of stimuli which will actually increase the possibility or probability of any particular kind of response for any particular kind of stimulus. So it will increase the possibility of occurrence of a particular response. What it will do? Feedback and reinforcement. It will increase the possibility of the occurrence of a particular response. So we'll have two type of positive reinforcement, like giving rewards, and the negative response, like punishment or reprimanding. We call that as punishment. So reinforcement is used for three purposes: strengthening the response, changing the response, or modifying or correcting the response. There are three bases for providing any kind of reinforcement, reward for it. Now we understand that we have to change or strengthen or modify the response. Therefore, we have to deploy various kind of strategies. Now we will focus on strategies. So we will make the conditions, the environment, so that it will be providing the various kind of learning to the child, and then we will provide the conditions for the reinforcement strategies which affect the students' participation in the activity and ultimately learning of the content. So what we see that teaching strategies that turn the pupil-teacher interaction into an impressive learning tool. So whenever we are talking about the deployment of teaching strategies, three areas should be considered: presentation of subject matter, levels of learning, and levels of context of learners, that is the individual difference. So we see three areas which we have to consider, for deployment of teaching strategies. So what we see, Devinder Singh Parihar, what are you asking about? So students also feel that teacher and feel about the teacher and diagnose his personality as a teacher, because then he will be connected to it. Also, the interactive phase activities are carried out by the teacher as well as by the students, and teachers should deploy various strategies with different kind of stimuli during the interactive phase. So if we are talking about the operations at the interactive phase, what we see, there are two: teacher PDA, perceptual diagnostic achievement, student PDA, perceptual diagnostic achievement. So there are two way of interactive phase. First one, perception by the teacher. Second one, perception by the student. So Amandeep is asking for the token economy. Let us see what is token economy. So when we are talking about the token economy, what is the token economy? So we have to identify the response cost of the learner. Like what we see that an individual is interested in sports. Okay, so his tokens will be within the sports. Now what we will do, if we are teaching the commerce and taking the taxation class, and we have to take one example of debit or credit, what example we may use? We may use the example of the sports the individual child likes. Because if we are talking about the particular sport which is in the liking domain of the particular child, he will have the attention. Okay, one individual child likes the cricket and we have started talking about, oh, in the cricket IPL, the people are making so much of money. He will be interested. Oh, sir is talking about the IPL. So what we see that we have tokens which will be invested within the child. So we have to identify what are the response cost of the child. How we gonna make the response from the child? It can be the cognitive tokens, it can be the physical tokens, like if reward can be given, reward can be there, punishment can be given. So we have to token, we don't have to take the reinforcement in a harsh manner or in a soft manner. We have to just take the tokens. So best example of the token is for a nursery child, when some smiley is given on the hand of the nursery child, what we will see, they will be they become very happy, they becomes very jubilant. So what we see, they are happy to gain the smileys on their hand. The teacher should make the smileys on their hand. They are their tokens. But are they the same tokens for the college going adult learners, the adolescent learners? No. If I am going to make smileys on the college going kids, be the boys or the girl, they will say that, oh, sir is mad. What is he doing? So what we see, we have to identify the tokens of the learner, and through that we can give the feedback and reinforcement to the learner, the particular stimulus which is useful for the particular learner. So interaction operations in the interactive phase, perception. So perception in the context of teacher as well as the student, because if they are not perceiving the activity as a learning opportunity, what we see that the learner will not engage in activity. Then the diagnosis, second one is, so we have to diagnose the child, what is their achievement, what are their levels of learning, how they have performed within the classroom. We can ask several questions, we can probe them, we can assess them. There can be various tools to diagnose the child. Then comes the reaction process. What are the various kind of reactions or the responses the child will provide to? So these are the three things which we have to understand. Then comes the post-learning, post-active phase. In the post-active phase, we generally analyze evaluation results to determine the student's learning. We have to identify the problems in the specific areas. We have to reflect upon our own teaching. We have to decide upon the necessary changes we will make in the next instructional period. Because if something is not achieved, we have to modify it. If something has achieved, we have to move on towards the next. So mainly we are concerned with the evaluation activities, because after the post-learning phase, we have to provide the evaluation. So in the post-active phase, we are concerned with the evaluation activity. By observing the student behavior, that will include the test, quizzes, observing behavior in the questions, in the comments, in the structures, in the unstructured situations. Everywhere we will observe, ask questions, take quizzes, take the test. So we have to evaluate the achievement of the pupil and attainment of the objectives which we have planned when we have the pre-learning phase. So following activities are suggested in the post-active teaching. Defining the exact dimensions of the changes caused by teaching. Selecting appropriate testing devices and techniques. And changing continuously strategies in terms of evidences we have gathered. So if we are defining the exact dimension of the changes caused by the teacher, what we see that we have the criterion behavior. We know that what kind of behavior is expected from the child. That is the EBO, expected behavioral objective. So whether those objectives, those behavioral changes have been achieved by the child or not. This will help to understand that whether our teaching objectives have been achieved or not. So it will reflect both on the learner perspective, also on the teacher's working perspective, because we can assess ourselves also. If the learning is appropriate, then that means that our strategy, our method is actually very good. Then comes the second one, selecting appropriate testing and devices and techniques. So we have to select those things which will actually measure. So there are certain, which we will understand in the evaluation part, there are certain aspects for this kind of thing. Appropriation of the testing or appropriation of the evaluation, that is validity, objectivity, reliability, usefulness, then according to the various kind of rules and regulations. So there are various kind of things which we have to see so that we can identify the appropriateness of the testing device. Then changing the strategies in terms of evidences gathered. So as we are using the reliable and valid and objective testing round, what we will see? We will see the knowledge about the various kind of learning within the child. In the next class, we will see the unit plan that is given by the Morrison. Unit plan on the basis of phases of teaching. That is called the unit plan, because nowadays in the CBCS we have to plan the unit, then we will plan up the, for taking up the unit we have to plan the various kind of topics or activities which will lead us to the unit completion. Any question you want to ask within a day? In the next class, we will take up the unit plan on the basis of phases of teaching, and then we will take the levels of teaching. These two will be in the next class. So thank you everybody for being with us, because you people are the reason so that I can learn and work upon. Thanks everybody. I expect that everybody will spread the constructivism so that the teaching and the learning processes can become enjoyable. On the note of that, I'm taking I am taking leave from this class. We will meet again. Namaskar.